Hello everyone and welcome to this month's podcast. My name's Ryan, I am Director of Walker Recruitment Limited, and today I'm very excited to have on board with us as a guest speaker Ruth Waring. Today the topic is challenges and opportunities within future logistic operations. As I said, I'm very excited to have Ruth on board with us today. As I say, she took time out of her busy schedule to come and chat with you about it. She's organised a little kind of presentation that she'll go through and discuss various topics on the subject. So what I'll do now, I'll pass you over to Ruth and she can get started.
And I've worked in the transport industry and border logistics industry since 1989. I've got a short slide about me, but about my background. I'm the Managing Director of a company called Labyrinth Logistics Consulting. We set up in the year 2000 as a specialist transport consultancy, although since 2008 we also specialise in broader logistics and supply chain projects. My personal expertise lies within haulage. And specifically within the haulage industry, I concentrate on compliance and health and safety specialisms. And I have a team of people who work with me to help hauliers and others who operate fleets of trucks stay compliant both in terms of operator licensing and workplace transport and road risk. So I've worked in the industry, as I said, since 1989. I started off for working for the NFC as a graduate trainee, like so many other people in the industry. And I've worked for the NFC, a company called Jeffco, French company, which was then part of Peugeot Citroën. And then the last job I had before going self-employed was I worked for Pearson, which was a book publisher, and as a transport manager for them for a couple of years. And then I went self-employed in 2002. So I've actually been self-employed for a very long time, and now have offices, a team, PA, and a proper business, which is fantastic. And as part of giving something back to the logistics industry, which has done me so many favours over the years, I decided to set up a group called Women in Logistics UK. I did that in 2008. It had long been a dream of mine to have a networking group for women in the industry. And since then, that group has flourished, and we now have 3,600 members. With, very importantly, we welcome men into the group, so we have about 600 of our members are actually men. And ever since I started in the industry, I've been a passionate advocate for diversity in the logistics sector. I've got a slide about this later on, but I do feel that the sector itself is missing a trick, really, in terms of improving diversity. And compared to most other sectors, I think we are dragging our heels. And we really could all benefit from a major injection of diversity and inclusion in our fantastic industry. So I'll move on to, is that going to let me move on? Yes. So what I'm going to be talking about today, I've got a slide about different types of future technology with some of my sort of insights in terms of the work that I've been doing within Labyrinth, and as well as some of the things that are coming in on the horizon. I go to quite a lot of seminars. I recently attended the Transport Intelligence seminar conference in London, and we also had the Women in Logistics conference last week. At both of those, I learned quite a lot of new things about technology and sort of a bit of horizon scanning, what's coming up, what's important for the industry, and what are called disruptive technologies, which could affect us all. If we just think about how Amazon has impacted on the logistics industry as an isolated example, we can see how just one company can make a huge amount of difference. I'm also going to talk about the driver shortage, by which I mean the LGV driver shortage, or is there a shortage? So I'm asking some questions around that a bit later on, and then I'm going to put a slide about how we can all work together to improve diversity within the logistics sector, and specifically what the benefits to improving diversity would be, both for the companies and for the sector as a whole. So moving on to future technology, I think the first thing to talk about really is the revolution of the cloud. For those of you who don't know what the cloud is, it's basically a sort of just sits there where you can store data, and it's not visible, but it's there. It's a bit, it's called the cloud because it's a bit like a cloud, and effectively it's changed the way that companies within the logistics sector store information. So even if we think about maybe 5 years ago, where we would have been talking from one system to another system. So if you're a haulier, you would have had to have a messaging system going between your transport management system or your warehouse management system and your customer's system, whatever it was. That's completely changed now, and all the information can be stored in the cloud and therefore be made available to different parties from the cloud. So, for example, the product, you can see the bottom right-hand corner of my screen, the product that my business has developed is called FCILT Thread, and it's an operator licensing compliance tool. And what's amazing about this is that it enables somebody to sit geographically anywhere and monitor the compliance of all the depots across any network to see whether the depots are at red, amber or green status, and then at any one moment be able to, whether you're on holiday in the Maldives or whether you're in Aberdeen or sitting in head office, it doesn't matter, you can drill down to see exactly what the evidence is that that depot has uploaded and be absolutely finger on the pulse as to whether that depot is compliant or not. So having information in the cloud has kind of taken away the sort of old-fashioned transport requirement of we've got to schlep around all the depots, we've got to have information available on site, and the traffic commissioners and the DVSA are now catching up with this. I think everybody's realised that information is now available via the internet, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be physically present on site at every moment. So I think that as an individual development has kind of crept up on the industry a little bit actually, but it's extremely significant because it takes away the need to be physically present. The next point I've got there is Uberization, and again, for those of you who don't know what that term means, sorry, just a quick sip of coffee there. Uber is obviously the taxi app, which enables you to get a cab without having to use without having to go through the sort of formal black cab system or even the registered cabs that we know and love. So basically, it's about, again, using the cloud to be able to share resources. Similarly, the concept of Airbnb, where people can share their homes, and effectively it's a democratization of any available space. So if we think about that concept within the haulage industry, we can also see that clearly space being available on trucks, the main problem has always been how to communicate the space availability, how to make sure that that truck is in the right place to be able to collect a backload or a part load at any particular point in its journey. So effectively, the way that technology has changed it means that we are now moving towards an Uberized model within the freight industry. And again, I think with disruptive technologies and some of the other things that are happening within the technological development, we will see more and more examples of the entire industry becoming Uberized. And whilst that's got great potential benefits for utilisation of vehicles, improving fuel efficiency and reducing the amount of carbon emissions, it is going to be a major game changer for this industry. And I think one of the challenges that we have, if you think about the sort of the old-fashionedness, especially of freight and haulage, is that sometimes a bit like Kodak, sort of not quite realising that digital revolution was going to kill it until it was almost dead. I think sometimes our industry can be very sort of slow to realise that some of these things are happening. So be aware that Uberization is happening, and you know, companies like TG Matrix, which are launching soon, are going to be using this technology to make sure that freight space is available and sold and using the technology available. So don't overlook that. The next point is about Generation Z and gamification, which I think is quite an interesting challenge. I'm indebted to Amy Isherwood from Eddie Subbart, who talked about this at the Women Logistics Conference last week. I thought it was worth putting in here because effectively Generation Z is the people who have been born really since about 1995, I suppose. So they're really young, and there's not many of them knocking around our industry. But the Generation Z raison d'etre is that they have been brought up with everything happening now, goods being delivered straight away, everything's, if you order it now, you'll get it tomorrow. And they have this very, very quick turnaround expectation, which doesn't necessarily extend to the rest of society, although obviously we're all catching up. And one of the things that Generation Z is very keen on, and again has been brought up with, is the concept of gamification. And just to explain what that is, that everything is enhanced, and the experience of anything can be enhanced by making it into a game. So what that means, for example, is if you go to have any particular experience, the Generation Z generation are expecting to get little rewards for things. So just as we get a buzz when our, literally and potentially metaphorically, when we get, somebody likes our Facebook status, or if we get a WhatsApp message, and there's different sounds and noises that drive you nuts when it's your son or daughter. Actually, it's quite nice when it's you. And they are part of a gamification. So every time you get that buzz of or a noise, you actually feel a rush of dopamine, which is a drug in the brain that makes you feel better. So I think as an industry, we have to learn how we can gamify more things. And the reason that Amy Isherwood was talking about it from Stobart's was that they're looking at how they can potentially gamify some of the elements of the driver CPC and other training elements. And I know that other companies are looking at this as well. So we can all learn from a much younger generation, and also learn more about how human beings respond to elements such as having some game aspects within what can otherwise be very dull day-to-day aspects of our lives. The next point I've got there is last mile solutions. So last mile has always plagued the industry, and as we know, we've in the past at least we've had major issues with delivery is not happening because the people aren't in. I think we've had a revolution in terms of people having more and more deliveries sent to workplaces. We've now got people like Doddle, Collect Plus, and other last mile solution experts, and obviously Amazon themselves as well, who now have their delivery pods, and you can also see around the back of garages and so on. There's lots and lots of places that Buy Box, for example, they have a network of boxes which you can deliver into. So final mile solutions have always been a challenge, certainly in urban areas. And I recently saw a presentation when I was at the Transport Intelligence Conference for a company called Bring.com, which it's on the screen, double G at the end. And they have developed some software which is very clever, whereby they will interface with any transport network or any capability where you're making a final delivery, and they will basically, using an app, get the person receiving the delivery to say where they are and what time they want the delivery to be, 1 hour slot available, and then they can, using the app, they can see the driver approaching, so they know exactly what time that delivery is going to be made, which revolutionises the whole kind of waiting in for the parcel to arrive, and some of the very old-fashioned things that I can remember when I sort of having to take a day off work for deliveries and stuff like that. So I think last mile solutions and again the fusion of technology to answer some of these major questions is extremely interesting as well. So I thought I should probably talk a little bit about drones. Unfortunately, Jeremy Clarkson's on this first video. I'll play it. You can watch it. But what's interesting is this thing called the Sense and Avoid technology. So I was reading an article about the drones. These are Amazon drones that have been developed specifically to make deliveries of very are lighter elements, so things weighing less than 5 pounds in American imperial weight, and also within 15-mile radius of the distribution centre. So it would only be a limited application, I think. But what the boss said in the interview, the longer interview that I read, was that this sense and avoid technology is a bit like the difference between a horse or a car. If you wanted to drive a car into a tree, the car would let you drive it into a tree, but a horse wouldn't let you ride it into a tree. So the drones are actually, that their sense and avoid technology won't let them fly into things. So I'll just play this clip now. Can you still see my screen? Yeah. Okay. And then the other one is a short one for Domino's. So can you still see my screen okay there, Ryan?
Yeah, I can see it, no problems at all.
Excellent. Okay. So I think the message really on drones is that there's still a huge amount of concern relating to the aviation issues, but it looks to me as if Amazon in particular are concentrating on very local deliveries, but I think a lot of people are saying that there's going to be a major hill to climb because of the issues around airports, but there could be a real opportunity for delivering aid to certain regions in the third world, and where airdrops, for example, can be extremely inaccurate. Drones could be extremely accurate. So I think there's very much an opportunity that drones will have a role to play in the future of deliveries, but not necessarily in the obvious way that we've just seen on the Jeremy Clarkson video. In terms of driverless vehicles, again, interesting stuff. There's a trial planned for later this year on a stretch of the M6, where there will be a pontoon, as it's called, of driverless vehicles. The challenge really on driverless vehicles, again, when you look into it in more detail, is that it's great for trunk roads, long distance journeys, but you've always got to get on and off the trunk roads. Are we really expecting there to be driverless vehicles going through some of the streets of Cornwall? And it's extremely unlikely. I mean, the most likely situation is that we will have to have a network of what are called on and off ramps. So the way that you can get a driver to drive a vehicle from wherever it is onto the motorway, and then actually, then what do you do with that driver? I mean, the Daimler trials have all got drivers in them. It's not necessarily that we're going to have driverless, completely driver-free. It means that you're not then actually incurring issues around drivers, the current EU drivers' hours. We've got potential for productivity savings, massive savings on fuel economy if we can just optimise the speed at which those vehicles are driven, and potentially looking at the driver shortage. If you don't have to be quite so skilled, then you could possibly say that having driverless vehicles could help because you don't have to be as skilled. There's also some evidence it could reduce road traffic collisions, although that probably seems unlikely if you're looking at it from the point of view of being a pedestrian or another car user next to a driverless vehicle. But of course, it's also the risk of the drivers themselves being killed that's reduced. So again, I think we're looking to see what is on the horizon for that. But I don't think it's going to be a one-stop shop solution to all our woes in this industry, but I think it's worth keeping an eye on the technology and some of the things that are happening as things progress with those technological advances. So moving on to the driver shortage challenge, the first thing I'd like to talk about is to say thank you to Kirsten Tisdale from Arisia. Kirsten's one of my colleagues, and she's done some extremely interesting research and data gathering on the potential for driver shortage. So I'll send you to her blog, which is There Is No Driver Shortage. And basically what she's done is through Freedom of Information request, she's got information out of the DFT, or DVLA I should say. We can see now this graph here. So the graph is showing driver numbers employed as LGV, LGV with driver qualification card, and those who have entitlements. So if you see at the bottom of the graph, we have the dark purple. That is those who are in that age bracket who are currently employed as LGV drivers, earning a living as working as a driver. We've also then got this very interesting violet section, which you can see between 40, when we get to 40 to 54, these sections become significant. These are actually Great Britain only, but these are drivers who have got their driver qualification card as well as their LGV license, so then they're basically not using it. So you can see there are quite significant numbers of people who are working either in the industry but not as a driver, or they have left the industry but they've decided to keep doing their driver periodic training just in case. And then you can also see significant numbers in white in each, so at the lower end of the spectrum in particular, between say 25 and 44, there's a huge number of people who have their LGV license who are choosing and who have currently not done their driver qualification cards. They haven't done their periodic training for their driver CPC, but that's only 5 days that they would need to do to get their license back up to scratch. So the point about this slide, really, this information here, is to say there's not actually a shortage of trained drivers. What there is a major shortage of people who want to work in the industry. And I would say that article by Kirsten Tisdale is very much worth a read. There's a huge amount of good information there. And then there's also a very interesting, if we go back to this slide, a very interesting blog, sort of question and answer thing really, around why drivers don't want to work in the industry. And then we've got some information here about the issues that have brought the sector to this situation. We've got economic growth. The sector's average age is 53, which is going up every year. I mean, it's sad that sometimes you read is 55, but obviously that's going to just, at the moment, that's just going up all the time. The perception of logistics is not traditionally seen as a career of choice. Changing needs around training, and obviously in the additional requirements of the certificate of professional competence, which I've just spoken about, that drivers have to do 5 days of training to gain their driver qualification card to be able to earn money working as a driver. What's interesting here is that the comments, so there's 333 comments, and there's lots of different opinions voiced here, but basically saying why people, mainly drivers, why they have struggled to remain drivers, or why they've decided to leave the industry. So again, definitely worth a read. From my perspective, we recruit lorry drivers for some clients. We only do this because we were asked to do it. It wasn't something particularly we wanted to do, but a couple of our clients were really keen for us to take this on. And what we've found is that we have to go in and do a complete review of all our procedures before we even start recruiting. Otherwise, we're just throwing money at recruitment, and actually you're just not going to keep the drivers. So when we go in, we have a recruitment specialist called Jen Dixon who works for me, and she does an initial gap analysis of where the company could have issues. And the first issue is usually that absolutely nobody in the traffic office has been either trained or given any time or resource to dedicate to recruiting drivers. So you've got somebody who's actually being asked to do interviews, who doesn't know how to interview, potentially people doing driving assessments who don't know how to do driving assessments, and really thrown in the deep end. And then that gives drivers a bad feel for the company. So even if they do join, they may be thinking, well, if I get a better offer, I'll go somewhere else. But it's not just about recruitment, it's also about retention. And the industry is well aware of this, but it's not just about toilet facilities. That's a kind of a bit of a red herring, really. Yes, toilet facilities are important, and toilet facilities for female drivers in particular are absolutely abysmal. I can tell you that from personal experience. But I think it's actually all about the way that we treat drivers, and the fact that the industry has, over the years, kind of got away without having to worry about them too much, and then suddenly we've got to look after them properly, and it's just not within the industry's DNA. And I think that's a major uphill struggle for a lot of companies to get their heads around. Actually, they are now needing to properly nurture their drivers, take time to understand their motivations, what they really want in life. And we've recruited drivers recently, and this has just blew my mind. The driver said, I'm going to leave because I need to get back for 5 o'clock because my wife goes to work and she's got a new job, and I need to look after our little boy. Now in the past they'd have said, well, go on then. Now they're moving mountains to keep this driver because he's good. So it's suddenly the world has changed, and everybody has realised that good drivers are like gold dust, and you need to keep them, you need to look after them. But that's quite an enlightened employer that is prepared to do that. And a lot of transport companies in particular are still struggling to look after drivers properly. So again, it's not just about the way that you speak to them, it's about the facilities, it's about the way that work is allocated, the way that parking, where they're allowed to park, where they're allowed to eat, the hours that they're expected to work, where they're expected to go. You know, if you don't marry a driver with the job that they want, they may very well want to have a tramping job up to Scotland. That might suit them fine. But if they really want to be working while their kids are small, if they want to be working locally, and they want to be sure that they're going to get home in time to pick somebody up from school, then you need to look at that and accommodate that. So I think it's really a sea change in the way that we look at the way that we perceive drivers as ambassadors for the business, and as a massive asset to our industry. And I think we've just kind of, as an industry, we've overlooked them for too long. And also the old lads and dads recruitment, the way we've just said, oh, if you know anybody who wants to be a driver, if they've got a licence, great. We need to be looking now far more at, are we offering licence acquisition schemes? Are we offering pathways from a 7.5 tonner to a 17 to an Arctic? Are we looking at pathways to eventually go into the traffic office? What are we offering to drivers as a career path? Because it's just not going to be a career of choice for young people otherwise. And then I'm moving on to improving diversity. The graphic there at the top is kind of groupthink. So the idea is that if we're all the same, if we're all middle-aged men in grey suits, cough, cough, then we're probably just going to all walk in the same direction, not challenge each other, and eventually we're going to walk off the end of the cliff. So why is diversity important? I mean, a lot of people say to me, well, the industry has always been like this. It's never going to change. Why does it matter if everybody that works in logistics is a man? Well, it does matter. It matters because diversity and independence, this is a quote from James Suwiecki, diversity and independence are important because the best collective decisions are the product of disagreement and contest, not consensus or compromise. So it's the struggle. It's the struggle to come to an agreement which is powerful and brings the most exciting and important decisions into business, not where everybody just sits around nodding and saying, yes, that sounds great. So it's worth Googling groupthink. There's quite a lot of interesting stuff on Wikipedia about groupthink. But basically, it's if you've got a room full of the same sort of people, they're going to think the same sort of thoughts, and they're also going to be far more inclined to become involved in what's called the spiral of silence. So spiral of silence basically is if you are in the minority, the quote being, all it takes for evil to triumph is for a few good people to say nothing. And I think it's so easy, especially, and I've experienced this myself, when you're a woman or you're in a minority in a particular situation, you just think, well, I'll just shut up because, nobody wants, it's just too awkward to say something to counter the overwhelming feeling that you are outside the group dynamic. It's just too, it takes a very special sort of person to be able to put the hand up and say, I disagree. But the problem is that when you get spirals of silence and groupthink, you'll basically just all walk off the cliff together. And this is exactly what happened in the testosterone-fueled world of the financial markets in 2008, where everybody was saying yes to these very, very high-risk deals, and then eventually we all went off the cliff together because there was just too many men thinking the same sorts of things with high-risk situations, in situations that were very much fueled by the way that group thought. And so we have to be prepared as an industry to move away from all being the same, and we have to very much challenge this spiral of silence. And as individuals, we can challenge that by saying to the person in the room that we know probably disagrees but is keeping their mouth shut, so what do you think? We do value your opinion. It's also really important that you reflect your customer demographic. So if you're working for ultimately delivering to customers that are reflecting the demographic of the UK, for example, then you're going to have quite a lot of people who are not necessarily white with middle-aged men. In fact, white middle-aged men are going to be in the vast minority, aren't they, really? So the fact that the people delivering your services are completely at odds with your client demographic is not going to help you understand your customer and understand what they need, and ultimately give them what they want. If you want to be an agile, flexible business, then basically you've got to be able to reflect the needs and wants of your clients. And if your staff are completely different to your clients, it's not going to help you do that. There's also a very well-established link with profitability. There's a website there, the McKinsey report, in terms of the link between profitability and the teams. And I'll just go to that link. It's actually quite interesting. So it's to do with the senior teams and the link to profitability. So you can see here that if you have a more diverse senior team, then there is significant evidence that those with diverse executive boards enjoy significantly higher earnings and returns on equity. So again, this is a very well-established link between the two, but again, people seem to overlook especially in the transport industry, overlook these huge benefits. And I think again, it's to do with challenging the norms, maybe doing things differently, gaining competitive advantage over the others in the industry by doing something completely different. And again, back to the impact of somebody like Amazon, where you can see by just completely thinking completely differently and not being and being brave, and basically being brave and doing something different and challenging the way that the industry, has always done things, has led to these huge advantages. So you can see there that the difference between the top quartile in the UK, those who've got the most diverse boards, had a return on equity of nearly 28%, and 17% to those with the bottom quartile of diverse boards. So I think there's a very clear message there that it's not just pink and fluffy, nice to do, tick in the CSR box. This is actually very important for the bottom line. The next point I wanted to make was, this phrase, women and other minority groups. It just makes me laugh, women are more than half the population, and we're not actually any sort of minority, and yet you'd get the impression, looking around you, when you go into any logistics or transport environment, that maybe we are some sort of tiny minority. And I just wanted to get through to the audience, really, that it's how important it is to stop seeing women as a minority group, and actually to perceive us as the customers that we are. When you look at the influence that female purchasing power has throughout, not just in the freight sector, but the knock-on effect in retailing and manufacturing, the goods that women influence buying. You have to work backwards from that. What does my workforce need to look like in order to reflect the demographic of our ultimate clients? And for those of you who don't know, I'm the founder of Women in Logistics UK. So if you were looking for something to do to actually improve diversity within your teams, then one of the easiest and cheapest things you can do is to encourage your workforce to join Women in Logistics. We at Women in Logistics, which I set up in 2008, I talked about that. So we've got 3,600 members, and we have a series of very inspiring events which we hold over the year. I had a message from somebody who came to our event on Friday this morning, a very senior chap who works in the government. He said he'd never experienced, in fact, he just was amazed at the enthusiasm of the speakers and the enthusiasm of those in the room, and it's just blown away by the energy. And I think that's the thing. If you get a lot of women in the room, you get a real good vibe. It's great if you want to send employees, especially younger employees, to experience the room full of women effect, because it's something quite special. And we also have the very positive impact that men come to these events and suddenly realise what it's like to be in the tiny minority, and they suddenly say, oh, and it's been really good, but it's I have felt slightly ill at ease, or I just felt a bit awkward. And you say, actually, yeah, that's exactly what it's like for me all the time. And they suddenly get it. And if you don't get it, if it doesn't happen to you, you don't necessarily get it. Why should you? But we want to make sure that men actually understand the challenge of being a woman in this environment, how hard it can be, how tough it can be just to get through the day. And we want men to then help us make the situation more female friendly. It can be tiny, tiny things. One of the initiatives that we always encourage people to do is, particularly in big companies, talk to all your staff. So that senior managers, who are mainly men, don't just talk to the men, the younger men outside the lifts or on the stairs about football. If they talk to everybody, then they'll know what everybody's working on. There's no need to be awkward about it just because you're talking to a woman. Go up to her at a desk and just ask her what she's working on, so that when opportunities, projects, big stuff comes up further up the line, you will know not only what the men are doing, but you'll also know what all the female employees are doing as well, whether they like football or netball or something else entirely. You don't just have to talk about football or rugby when you're standing around the lift. So please, I would say for any senior executives, just make an effort to talk to all your staff every month, just in a way of going up to their desks and just engaging with them, so that you know what everybody's doing, so that those opportunities would be available to anybody, not just those that you happen to have perhaps invited for a pint because they're a bloke. So let's go back. So Women Logistics organises a mentoring scheme, networking events. We're just a force for good, really, in the industry. We had our ball on Friday night, which is a big party. We have a band. We just have the most fantastic time, and we organise events that are very different. We want to showcase how it doesn't have to be same old, same old. It doesn't have to be sitting around in the bar till 3 a.m. talking rubbish, drinking brandy. You can do things in a different way, and we're just challenging some of those norms in the industry. So, Ryan, that is the end of my talk. Do you want to ask me any questions? There's somebody else online as well. They maybe want to ask me a question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, as I say, going through it, that brought up some really, really interesting points there. It's absolutely fantastic. I think one of the ones I'd like to ask is, obviously, with the driverless vehicles, do you think that the industry was forced to go through driverless vehicles because there's this sort of perception of a driver shortage?
No, I think it's come from the advances in technology. I don't think it's necessarily been anything to do with the driver shortage, actually, because I think the sort of the idea of the driverless vehicle has been in science fiction for many, many years, and I think we're just converging in those two things now at the moment. But I think it's just coincidence.
Just a coincidence. That's fair enough. Yeah. I mean, as I say, I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago about the kind of driverless vehicles and that sort of stuff. So I did a little bit of research on it, which is really, some of the technology in there is really fascinating, and it shows that the British technology is actually at the forefront of this at the minute, because they're the ones that are really a step ahead of everyone, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So it just shows that there's obviously they could bring in possible more like kind of job prospects as well for like kind of more into the engineering side of stuff, but obviously logistics as well, to be like kind of joining forces, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, with the driver shortage as well. I mean, as you can imagine, obviously recruiter, it's one of our main bugbears, and it's really the graph that you showed there was fascinating, because it just shows you the amount of people who have got the license but don't want to use it. I mean, what do you think the problem is? Is it because of the CPC that's just been brought in?
I think there's a number of things. I think there's the white that we showed on the graph. I think that's a lot of military people who've come out of the army, who've got their license, and they don't necessarily, it wasn't necessarily in their mind that they would be a driver, but it's still a possibility. So I think we've got lots of them. I think there's also just a lot of people who now work in traffic office, or who are managers, who just don't want to give up the option of being able to drive from time to time. So I think there's a lot of that. But I do think there's just a lot of people who've given up on the industry because I just don't think they feel they're treated well enough. That's the biggest problem. Yeah,
so it just shows that the industry has to really change and move forward from what it used to be like. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
I exactly agree with you there, because every time I obviously interview a new driver, it's always like kind of the industry's X, Y, and Z. I'm not getting paid enough as I should be. I'm not
Mm.
treated to the best trucks in the world. And it's, I mean, the thing is people have to put the time. It's investing in them, because at the end of the day, they're actually representing the company, the front line at the end of the
Yes,
day, aren't they? So they,
they're the ambassadors is the word. They are the
yeah,
ambassadors of
that's
the
it. The
company.
ambassadors to the company. You know what I mean? If you don't, every other industry does it. You know what I mean? Every industry has like
Mm.
apprenticeships and stuff like that to bring people up to speed and treat them properly and use certain things. I think it's about time also the logistics side of things actually kind of catch up with the rest of the other different industries. Definitely right on that one.
Mm.
Um, I think the best one, I mean, I'm really interested about the diversity. I completely agree with what you were saying there as well. With the
Mm.
diversity, I think um, it's sometimes I think for obviously like a woman to come into the industry, it's a bit intimidating to start with, as you can
Mm.
imagine, with the as you say that the old school guys are in there, the 99% majority of gentlemen, and it can be
Mm.
a bit of intimidating. But I think it's great because it breathes a breath of fresh air into each company
Yeah.
sort of thing. It expands.
Changes the atmosphere quite a lot.
Of
And
course.
I think initially men are a bit. I mean, I always get, oh, so you know, excuse my language, or and you just think, oh, come on. But I think it's comfort zone. Initially, I think a lot of men are like, oh, I don't want a woman in our canteen because I'm used to sitting around scratching my nether regions and talking rubbish. But the minute you actually get a woman in there, they think, actually, this is a bit better because, you know, there's some soap and there's a towel and there's a nicer atmosphere and actually everybody's a bit nicer to everybody and
That's
it
it.
actually makes such a difference. It really does, you know. So
And, and
I just think, you know,
And as also along with them, they bring in fresh ideas of
yes, absolutely.
because
Yeah,
as you can imagine,
definitely.
these guys have been in it for like 10, 20 years sort of thing, maybe longer. And then obviously
Mm,
someone else comes in with different aspect and a different view on things, and they could be
mm,
like, "Oh wow, why did nobody else think of this?" You know, so it
yes,
opens them up to different ways of thinking and different ways of operating as well. And
exactly.
as
Yeah,
you can imagine, the more ideas, the better for the business and the better for the company going forward.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Wow, fantastic.
So
Well,
there's somebody else on the call. I don't know who it is.
I think so. Let's find. I think it's obviously that's an attendee. I think they've been very quiet, but I mean, as I say, I think that's covered everything. You've been very
Yeah,
insightful compared to everything there, which has been fantastic. A lot
great.
of things I think a lot of people can take away from, especially with the technology side of things. I mean, the
Mm,
Uberization, that's really, really interesting because you never really think that would actually be involved in logistics. You always seen it with
mm,
like the cars and the taxis and stuff. But you never really think it would be. Very, very clever.
mm, yeah.
And then, I mean, the drones would be very interesting. I'd like to see in the near future how that would get on, to be honest. I mean, what do you think, what timescale do you think that would take to get to be,
The drones.
yeah, to be implemented, like, as a part of
Well, I
your
think
life?
the technology's there, isn't it? It's not the technology that's the problem. It's I think there's a number of things. It's the aviation security aspect. It's the kind of is the market ready? You know, it's all very well with the video of somebody standing in the garden waiting to collect the boots, but what happens if nobody's in? You know, there's all of these kind of. Sometimes you have to wait for the market to catch up with you. You know, like I did with women in logistics. I had the idea of women in logistics in 1989, but I didn't do anything about it until 2008 because the world wasn't ready. So, you have to sometimes wait for the world to be ready. But I think the world is changing now at such a pace with this Generation Z and everybody wanting things so quickly that I think that you know that the younger generation will drag the older generation with them, and we will see those changes coming in quite soon.
Yeah, they'll probably drag them kicking and screaming, I can imagine, no doubt.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I mean, would you, with the future of things coming, I mean, obviously there's an important, obviously, just to kind of jump on, you probably had this a few times, obviously, the kind of market you're in. There's an important time on Thursday with the referendum. What's
Mm.
the opinion you've got? What do you think would be What would happen, in your opinion, if we left the EU or if we stayed in the EU? Would you think it's all scaremongering that's going on there? Is it going to have a detrimental effect on the business as a whole?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. My main concern, my main concern is if we leave, is so much of the world that I work in is regulated by, under EU regulations. So all the health and safety legislation, although ultimately it comes under the UK law, which is the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, many aspects of the detail are under EU regulations, the manual handling, Legionella, working at heights, all of the things that we kind of do day in, day out. I've actually come in since 1992 as part of the EU changes, and I'm, sort of interested / horrified to see what happens if we do leave the EU. Will there be this bonfire of the regs? I don't know, and if we do, what's going to come in its place? Because we've come on in leaps and bounds in the last 25 years in terms of reducing accidents, particularly road traffic collisions have dramatically reduced, and I think a lot of that has actually been down to the EU, not necessarily the changes that have come from the EU, but the changes that have been endorsed and made to happen within the EU framework. So I just don't know. If we leave, what happens to EU drivers' hours? Do we go back to using the domestic regs and the work? There's lovely books that people used to write their hours in. I don't know. The mind boggles really. And I guess the other thing is we will find out. But that's the thing that's interesting me the most, is what will happen to this regulatory regime that we all work in, and what will be the fallout from that? And I have absolutely no idea, and I don't think anybody else does either.
Yeah, definitely right. Because I think a lot of people are not really looking. I think they're concentrating more into a different side of the side. I mean, you're very right. You're probably one of the first people who've actually brought up that sort of subject about obviously the health and safety side of stuff, which has been in place for a number of reasons. I know a lot of people moan about it, but it's there for a reason, and that was brought in from the EU. And no one's really dwelled on that. No one's thought what happens to all these EU regs that have just been brought in. The
other thing that because I lived in France in 1990 to 1991 before the borders came down. So I've personally experienced being an immigrant in an EU country without the borders, and it was not pleasant.
Oh, really?
So
oh, God.
Yeah. So the idea that it's all one-way traffic and all the immigrants are coming to us. What about everybody that wants to go and live in Spain? What about everybody that wants to go and work in Germany or France? Suddenly you will find that we're being processed with every other immigrant, and it's extremely unpleasant. I've personally experienced that, and it wasn't good.
Yeah, so we'll be gone in a day.
So I've got a very unusual perspective on it, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Well, a very unique one, but very one that a perspective that should be brought to the forefront as well, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
As again, no one really talks about, which is great that you're bringing up the subject now. Hopefully this will kind of, when this goes, people watch this back, they might actually kind of jog their memories a bit and just say, maybe.
Yes.
Never know. You've influenced a few people there, Ruth.
Yes, exactly. Well, I hope so. I hope so. And when it goes viral.
That's it. We'll be internet famous.
Absolutely. It's really been an interesting thing to do research for, and I've enjoyed doing the webinar.
Absolutely fantastic. I just say what we'll do, we'll wrap it up there now. I just say, guys, what we'll do, we'll put share this out. It's been recorded, so it will be live on my Walker Recruitment website, which is walker-recruitment.co.uk, and obviously Ruth will have this as well, and she'll be obviously tweeting out on her Twitter page. Have you got a Twitter handle there? What's your?
It's at Ruth Waring. So it's at RUTHWARING.
ING, fantastic. So Ruth will be distributing that as well. So as I say, if people that were able to make it today, we'll definitely be able to send it out to the masses, and hopefully they'll watch it and be really insightful and take on board what's been said.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Ryan. It's been really interesting.
No problem. So thank you so much for taking time out, and hopefully for the rest of the week won't be too stressful. I know you've just recently moved offices, so I can imagine you're a bit up against it. So
yeah, I'm going to crack on and do some work now. Okay, well, thanks very much, Ryan,
no
and
problem at all.
thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.